You know, it's been crazy the last couple falls, and I would even go back to maybe 3 seasons back. And this is with a lot of experience of adding water to water holes. We're even considering it right now. Dylan and I hunted up in Wisconsin. We went all the way up. We went by a water hole, and we have cameras on it so we can see the level just going down, down, down. I think we filled it up 3 weeks ago, 300 gallons. It's already down 125 gallons. Now, deer are using it a lot, but we're getting to the point where that water is almost to the halfway point in that tub, and that's a big deal. They normally go through drought and moderate use. They'll go through about 100 gallons every 3 to 4 weeks. We're going. This is a higher than moderate use, so they're going through it more. But the bottom line is, these falls have been dry and hot, and I don't know if that's a prelude to what we're going to see during the wintertime. I know it's going to slam us, really hard at some point with freezing temperatures and lots of snow. 2 winters ago, once the snow settled in, we had it all on the ground all the way till March. It made it really difficult to shed hunt. Last year we had dust in January and February, so completely different. But all these falls have been the same. Super hot, super dry, and extended drought period. Lately, we're filming this on October 24th. I've been joking around with some people that I think our first moisture we're going to get coming up, and we haven't had appreciable moisture in at least a month, 5 weeks. We've had rye sitting on the ground twice, waiting for germination. We put some in around Labor Day, and we didn't get good germination. We did in some areas where there's heavier dew or there's more green foliage to hold moisture in, but we had other areas that didn't come in well, and so we put rye down again. And I would say end of September. And that rye is still sitting there. We have not had any rain, just zero moisture. So all that being said, we're having to deal with lack of rain, and then coming up, our first moisture will probably be snow. And that's what I really feel. It's heading that way. Maybe we'll get some moisture before then, but man, I see snow, coming before we get rain. It's been so dry. So how do you hunt? And that's a big question. A lot of us are dealing with this across the country. I feel for those that have been down in the south, southeast that have had excessive moisture. It's been terrible, horrible. And it's almost like where there's a ton of moisture down there, it's almost made it more dry up north. I'm not sure if that's a consistent weather pattern, but I do see sometimes we'll get southern Ohio, Kentucky, we'll get extreme moisture, and that means we're dry to the north. Up in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan. And so we'd like it to flip soon. And but in the meantime, it's a pre-rut. October 24th right now was our first morning hunt this morning. We actually had frosty temperatures, and we went out. We were on a water hole. I'm going to talk about some ways to beat the heat, beat the drought, and still find success. And maybe you have to change things up a little bit. And this first point here is green. Everyone sees the acorns dropping right now, and they say, well, the deer are now in the fields. We're having a hard time because the acorns are dropping in the woods. We're not seeing much. Typically, it's because other food sources, other areas of your habitat get hunter pressured. The deer just stay back. They feed on acorns, but they can't feed on acorns 24/7. In fact, in a 24-hour period, deer need to feed 5 times, and they have to have diversity. Or a deer research biologist in the past, he said that it'd be easier to list the plants that deer won't eat than the ones they do. They'll eat over 400 plants, shrubs, trees, green, whatever it might be. Acorns are one of those browse pieces, but just one is not something they want to eat 5 times in a 24-hour period, let alone every day. And so green is so critical. You're down in Kentucky for 6 days recently hunting. I actually shot my target buck on the 6th day. We actually extended it. Friend Andrew came with us, Jen, myself, and it was a buck I had some history with. We'll release that story here in the coming couple weeks. But I actually got a chance on him in September. I came back to hunt him 4 weeks later. It was actually Jen and I's our hunting moon, we called it. So we went down a few days after our honeymoon and our wedding, and that's where we spent our time. We had such a great time, and the guides and everything down there, the outfitter. We went back, and I kind of had a personal quest with this deer. And what I noticed in watching this, when the acorns are raining down, you could hear them just raining down in the woods. Those deer still couldn't leave to wait exit that woods, completely exit the woods and go onto food sources. And where they were actually stockpiling after dark made it pretty easy, because we'd watch them funnel through. They're going out to green 300 yards away. That's where they'd stay. And green meaning the farmer plants some green for cover crops, and they're going out there because they can't wait to hit green when they're eating acorns all day. Acorns are hard to digest. You know, it's interesting about green. Do you know that deer doesn't have to take a drink of water for weeks at a time? They get their moisture requirements met through green food sources. Brassica, you know, brassica, rape, turnip, radishes, that brassica family, back in the day they would wean, and they probably still do, they would wean cattle onto rape or brassica to eat. It's full of a lot of nutrients. It's a good thing for them to eat. But then if they gave it to them immediately, it's already grown, let's say a 24-inch high field of brassica out there, and you let cattle on it, they'll bloat because there's so much moisture in that brassica. They just consume it. There's a lot of moisture. And deer, on the other hand, are a little bit more regulatory as far as how much they're eating, how much you're intaking, how much they need. But bottom line is they need that green. That's how they take a drink. So imagine those acorns coming down. They're dry. Acorns, corn, they're really hard to digest. And I would say, I mean, just looking at it, I would think corn is better than even acorns. Acorns are pretty dry when they're eating that. But bottom line is they're coming through, they're living in those acorns, and they want something else bad when they leave their beds in the afternoon. So that's a really good thing for you, because you focus on green food sources. Maybe it's a distant hayfield that's still green. It's got some rye or wheat planted in ag fields. Maybe your green food plots that you have, if you have any. Maybe it's something like a green briar down in public land, down in Kentucky, Ohio, where they still have something in that plant. Green briar is actually an average forage that's available 365. So it's something different that has a green component or a bud component that deer can go eat. Buds. Think of green as buds. Buds on trees, hardwood regeneration, something different. Red osier dogwood in swamps, something different that they can have. Big difference from acorns, and especially when it's drought, especially when there's excessive heat, they want to take a drink and they'll search out that green, and that brings us to water. Obviously, if you give them water, they'll happily take it. So where they're going from bedding to green food sources, you put water on the way, they'll hit it every afternoon. Doesn't matter if the water is 200 yards or 100 yards the opposite direction. They want to be efficient creatures. They'll hit your water, and then they'll move on. Water holes, actually tanks. I like 300-gallon tanks. That's what we use from Rubbermaid. We used to use 100, but again, going back to, they don't last that long. So I like those tanks because there's been no study, so I can't say this scientifically with 100% fact, but the EHD midge, and there's been so many EHD problems this year, a lot of deer dying, they propagate in dry, cracking mud during times of drought. So when you see these extended drought periods and hot, rainless periods going in through the end of the summer, EHD persists. It's always going to. So if you have tanks that have water, there's no mud, there's no cracking mud around that. It's just dirt. And we plant green around that. So water tanks are awesome. I'm not sure that mud holes and water holes for deer are a good thing when it comes to EHD concerns. We're on the northern edge of EHD concerns, so it just depends. But water is outstanding. And when you get into the rut, people think, well, I'm going to go sit on a water hole and expect some movement in the morning. Think about it. At night, they went and found green somewhere. They filled up on moisture. They don't need to hit your water hole on the way back. And that's why when you find when they're eating acorns all day, when they're even in a cornfield all day and that's all they have, then the first thing you want to do when they get out of their beds is go hit some water if it's available on the way to green. If it's not available, they just go to the green. They'll take a drink, all night by eating that forage, and they don't need that moisture. But if you give it to them, they'll come, and it becomes a social hotspot. And that's something I noticed too that's different than eating green out in the field. That water, especially for bucks, they'll hit that water, they'll sniff around, they're looking for what does are there. And I've had bucks that I've shot where they're just cruising. They weren't even going to stop by the water because I think they're on a mission, but they went within 10 yards and you shoot them. They're just looking for that social hotspot on the way through. So water can be a really great offering this time of year, obviously, when it's this hot. And shade. You're hunting a field edge. Doesn't matter if it's a overgrown field. We saw some, by aerial, some overgrown fields down in Kentucky where they were just pasture tops that the state purchased and let go back to timber. There's a lot of brush, briars, weeds in those locations, and they haven't gone back yet. And so in those locations, shaded out off to the side can make a great spot. And where you have open fields, food plots, heck, if you're using bait down in Kentucky, Oklahoma, wherever you're hunting, Michigan, you want that bait in the shady side corner of the field if you can. You want to hunt the shady side of food plots if at all possible, because those deer are going to step out into that shade a little bit longer. I noticed that when deer were coming out of those woods where those acorns were raining down. It was about 5:30 when the shade was on me in the stand. And I could literally watch the shade come across the ground and come up to my feet, my shadow in the tree. It was something I looked forward to, because the last day when I actually shot my target buck, it was about 81, 82 degrees. And I was really looking forward to that. We'd sit out about 3. So you're looking forward to that time. I actually would take a nap about 4 to whenever I could. It was 4 to 4:45 that night. But you're just, the heat's coming right down on your face. So when that shade comes in, I like it better. But I noticed I didn't see a deer out in that sunlight coming out of the woods. It didn't matter if it was the high of 65 on the first day or a high of 81 the last day I was there. They didn't step out in the sun. They waited for the area to become shady and then they stepped out. So always think about that where you're hunting with shade. And then apples. Apples are full of moisture. And I think deer, if you have an apple tree, if you have a great crab apple tree that either one's producing great, deer love to munch on those apples when it's hot and dry. Again, it's like taking a drink. It's soft, it's succulent, and it's something different than the acorns that are raining down in October, November in most deer hunting locations across the country. And finally, neighboring pressure. What's neighboring pressure? And Dylan, you didn't catch me.
Oh, I was too busy looking at what you
He's the one that
on neighboring.
You
I
should
see you smudged out EIGH there. I'm like, he messed something up there. I didn't even look at pressure.
Yeah. See, Dylan usually, like every point, you usually correct me on at least one misspelling, it seems like. But anyways, what's neighboring pressure have to do with all of this? Deer will start to stockpile in areas of good habitat and diverse habitat. Habitat that has green, water, apples. You look at all these points right here. And most people, especially when it comes to green food sources, food plots, they overpressure those over and over and over again. And especially when things aren't really happening. You know, you look at the pre-rut and you think, well, man, bucks are supposed to start moving around. But they kind of get lulled into almost late summer, early fall patterns because nothing's really changed. You don't have those big freezes. You don't have any kind of snow, dry. It's kind of just persistent summer patterns almost. It's kind of lackluster and dull. So that neighboring pressure on good habitat. Doesn't matter if you're walking in 2 miles in an hour and a half to get behind private land on a public land parcel, or you have a pretty good parcel, you're waiting for your neighbors to muck around and spook things on their land, on their good habitat. When you know your neighbors are hitting good habitat, where they have a lot of green and they're pressuring, that's a great time, especially when it coincides with the pre-rut. Again, that's when we start hitting our morning stands like we did this morning. Otherwise, we're focusing on those afternoon food source movements or water, exiting a bedding area. So these are some points right here that can help you beat the heat and the drought. And I think it's pretty timely right now because a lot of us are going through this. And I look in the forecast, I see a chance of rain next Wednesday maybe. We had a chance of rain this Tuesday, it's 50%. When you only have one day with a chance of rain this time of year, the ground is so dry, the air is so dry, it seems like you need about 4 days of good 50% to 70 to 80% chance of rain, and you get one good day of rain. And that's kind of where we're at right now. I see rain here and there in the forecast over the next 2 weeks, meaning a day here, a day there, 40% here, 25% here. Probably not going to be enough. These conditions might persist for a while. We don't have any major cold fronts come through. We have cold fronts, and they're saying that next week. It's Tuesday to Thursday, drops 20 degrees, chance of rain on Wednesday. And I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. So hope you can head to the woods with a little bit different game plan to help you take advantage of this, because this is an opportunity. Focus on these things for this time of year. The deer have been really dry, it's hot, and they'll change their patterns. I think they've set into some patterns that maybe people are forgetting about. If you focus on these things right now, it'll really possibly change your hunt right now and for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. You're our best followers. You followed all the way to the end of the video. Really invite you to check out our website. We have our earthway spreaders for sale, great Christmas presents. We're booking clients right now, all 5 of us. So by the end of December, it seems early, but by the end of December, our schedule will be booked for 2025. It's hard to believe. I'm already booked for December and most of January, February. We have our web classes, the Rut web class, how to design your whitetail property, and really important, hunting hills and thermals, understanding the wind. Those are great products on our site, all the books. Thank you so much for watching all the videos, buying the seed that you did this year. Really appreciate you.